All right, look, I'm going to be honest with you guys today. I leave on Sunday for Cancun, and I have about 2 brain cells left right now that are not currently singing Jimmy Buffett songs. So I have no idea how this is going to go. I'm going to really rely on the speaker today to kind of carry things. But you know what? Let's get started. So hello and welcome to this month's community update. I'm really excited to get to our speaker. I've got a few quick announcements I want to get through, but I'm very, very excited. We have someone from the community today talking nice, deep technical nerd stuff, which is where I like to take these. Before we get to that, a few quick things. There was an announcement. We're very happy to be working closely with JetBrains on the IntelliJ IDEA plugin. I've been using IntelliJ for over 20 years now, and our contact over there was joking with me because I always forget the idea part. I'm on a very first name basis with IntelliJ. We've really seen some stuff together. But yeah, so I'm going to post this blog entry in the chat for you guys to read up on. We're excited to see how this evolves. Having them on board is going to be really awesome for keeping things up to date, adding new features. A lot of good stuff coming out of this. My monthly reminder, BazelCon has been scheduled. We're looking at the 16th and 17th in New York City. I was going to say lovely New York City. I mean, I suppose that depends on your view of cities and all. But yeah, I'm excited for this. In terms of news, the CFP should be beginning about a week or two into August. Like I said, I'm away next week, and then got to finish things out. Not to talk about dirty laundry, but like at Google, we're very particular about what you can actually ask people. So these anonymous surveys at the end of this is fine. They're anonymous. But once I start getting names and things like that, I'm still new enough here where I don't exactly know what I can ask. So looking to get that to you in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Start thinking about your topics. We're going to have room for a bunch of slots. We're figuring out the rest of the format, but definitely looking to bring back the birds of a feather sessions where we can have a lot more almost panel-based things, discussion things. I'm excited. So expect to hear a ton more about this in the coming months. And I'm throwing the save the date out for next month already because calendars fill up quick. And I'm actually fighting with the IntelliJ meeting for Thursday's time slot. So I'm claiming the 18th. I don't have a speaker yet. I have ideas, but I haven't told them I want them to speak yet. So I need to approach that gently rather than committing to things. But yeah, so we'll see then. Like I said, today's speaker is from the community. So let me use this as a chance to remind you, if you have something you want to talk about, and you've seen, this is only the third one, but you've kind of seen the tone and what I'm going for in these, by all means, reach out to me. Say, hey, we're curious to talk about our particular user journey or do a live debugging demonstration or anything like that we can use. I'm completely open to it. It's make my life a lot easier in terms of scheduling people. So feel free to reach out to me. Always happy to have new members on, community members, and Googlers alike. All right, you guys are not here to see me though. So I'm going to bring our speaker to the stage and let him introduce himself.
Hello. Thanks, Jason. My name is Son. I'm currently DevOps engineer at Quark Group, where I work as a Bazel consultant for the last almost a year now. Right, we work with various different customers regarding to help them with their Bazel and their CI/CD and DevOps engineer in general, the developer experience. And today I want to talk to you guys about Gazelle. Let me share my screen, I guess. Jason, can you see my screen? All right, perfect. All right. So the topic of the talk today is extending Gazelle, improving Bazel developer experience by build file generation. Right. So again, a little bit about myself, working at Quark Group. Previously, I worked in Booking.com, Alibaba, Lazada. I am a contributor to various different dev tools that you currently have in the market. The latest is Ruse Go and Gazelle. And I write and tweet about Bazel, mostly trying to aim toward new beginner. And that's also like the theme of this talk, which is introducing a Gazelle to beginners, right? Folks who starting to adopt Bazel. So let's talk about Bazel, right? What is the pain point of adopting and stopping people from adopting Bazel today? First of all, Bazel is fairly complex, right? Developers don't really know how it works. Secondly, developers don't really know about the rules, right? Usually, when you start up a new Node.js project, you run npm install and npm run, and that's pretty much it. What are rules, right? Developers don't want to maintain build file every single time that they edit a change or add a new dependency. These are all overhead that's stopping people from adopting Bazel today, right? Is that it's just a lot more work that they have to do on additionally on top of their normal development workflow, and these extra work slow them down. So adopting Bazel slow down your developer productivity. So therefore, we need to solve this, right? So how do we solve a pain point? One of the obvious way is to build abstraction. So if you think about it, right, rules are abstraction layers on top of Bazel. Bazel would put together a sandbox and put together your source code. Here are your toolings, and then run compilation program to output the archive, the artifacts, right? But without the rules, Bazel would not know which tool to use, which source file to take in, and how to interpret the output as artifacts. So rules are really an abstraction layers on top of Bazel. Now we're gonna be talking about Gazelle extension, which is another abstraction layers on top of rules, right? These abstraction layers serve the purpose of making the layer underneath it more simpler and easier to absorb, to use, right? With a Gazelle extension, or with Gazelle in general, developer would not need to really learn about Bazel internal rules, right? Or internal of Bazel or internal of the rules that they were using. Things are just going to work out of the box. And I would go as far as to say that in the future, right, all Bazel rules should comes with a Gazelle extension, right? And it just a nicer user experience in general, right? Having your build file managed for you, of course, except for edge cases. So, what is Gazelle? For those of you who are new, right? Gazelle is a tool that used to be part of Rules Go. It's written in Go. The original mission of Gazelle is to parse Go source and protobuf to generate build file, right, with all the Rules Go target inside. So let's say if you have a main.go, Gazelle would generate a Go library that consume that main.go and then expose that Go library to another Go binary target. All of that get generated in the build file for you. And later on, if you were to add in more source file, Gazelle would just parse up those source file and then add them into the build file for you. You don't have to touch the build file at all when you use Rules Go, right? Later on, this was moved out of Rules Go, right? And there was a mechanism that was created to extend Gazelle for all the languages. So even the Go language extension and the Proto language extension were both written under this extension mechanism so that they can be disabled or they can be re-enabled if wishes. There are several known extensions today. Most of the major rule set that we have an extension, right? Go and protobuf are the first one to be available. Recently, there were an extension for Python, for Java. There's a community managed for Node.js, community managed for R, Haskell, right? Starlark, Scala, Nix, and more to come for sure, right? All right, so how do you extend Gazelle for your own language, right? So there are several requirements, and we're going to go through each and one of them, right? So first of all, Bazel rules. You need to have a Bazel rules. Gazelle doesn't write the rules for you. Before writing the Gazelle extension, you need to write your own rules first and make sure that it's functional, right? You should be able to manually add it to your build file and do a Bazel build, Bazel test, and things should work as expected. Gazelle cannot help you create these rules. Gazelle is supposed to be an abstraction on top of these rules. It cannot replace it. So you're still gonna need to create the rules. So for example, right, if you were to create a new language, let's say hackathon language, right, hackathon.lang, then you would need to write a rules for that before you can write a Gazelle extension for that. So the second thing is the parser, right? And parser here is a very loosely term. A general purpose, a general way of thinking about this is that a Gazelle extension doesn't always need to be coupled with a programming language, right? It could be about almost anything that you just want to consume as a source of truth to generate your build file. And the parser here is essentially the extractor of these facts from your project, so that you can rely on those facts to create the build file, right? So some example, for example, your monorepo could have several spatial directory structure that your entire company do follow. For example, all the services can, all the production services can sit in like a spatial directory called projects, or all the tests need to sit in a spatial directory called tests, right? These are information that you can use to generate your build file. Therefore, it's very valuable for Gazelle. Or it can be a list of files, right? Your parser need to be able to extract this, and then if you are working with a programming language, then your parser would need to understand the dependency information between your source file. So which libraries, which constant, which variables you are using from external package, where are those external packages, right? These need to be understood by your parser. Spatial comments annotation that you want to make use, right? All these seems very hard, but I guarantee you it's not, right? And it should be very easy to get started. To get started, you actually don't really need a parser. You can use something very simple, which I will show in the example later. And currently on the market, there are spatial technology like tree-seeder, like Antler, which can make creating a parser quite easy compared to what we used to have before. Finally, how do you write the Gazelle extension? So the Gazelle extension, it must be written in Go today, right? You can still use Go to shell out to other languages. So for example, today, the Python Gazelle extension and the Java Gazelle extension actually use Go initially, but then it started up either a Python program or a Java program in the background, and then talk to those programs using various different protocols. There's also an extension that I will provide to in the link later that allow you to customize Gazelle using gRPC. So instead of implementing the extension using Go code, you can translate all that Go code into gRPC call into a different implementation in your favorite language that need to be supported by gRPC, of course. So in Go, there are interfaces, and here we are specifically talking about the language interface inside Gazelle. I will show you that interface a little bit later. And finally, you need to use Gazelle binary rules. So Gazelle has a rules called Gazelle binary to generate this custom Gazelle binary with the extension included. Now, there's some work in the way. So there's a pending PR right now that would allow you to build a Gazelle extension without needing this Gazelle binary rules, but that is not yet to be merged. So today, you're still going to need to use these rules until that extension is merged. All right, part 2. These are very, if you are seeing this as incantation and you don't really understand what's going on, I can walk you through it really quick. These are very Golang stuff. So first of all, you want to create a directory, right? And then cd into that directory. You want to initialize a new Go module inside that directory. And then you would get Gazelle as, you would declare Gazelle as a dependency of that new Go project, right? And then you're going to create a file named extension.go. You can choose whatever the package name that you want. And then you need to initialize a struct, right? Type extension struct. And this struct will be the object that implement the language.language interface inside Gazelle. There's a really nice and handy tool called github.com called imp, right? It's a short for implement. And you can copy paste this syntax. The slide will be available later, but you can copy paste this syntax, and then you're going to have the entire interface implemented for you with the very basic default. And yeah, just copy paste this, and you should be able to get started. Yeah, so third part, how you do this, you would need to declare a build file, right? And you're going to need to build this with RulesGo, of course. And yeah, you just need to use Bazel with it. So you set up your workspace according to RulesGo. You set up Gazelle, and then you create your build file, right? This is how your build file gonna look like. You have a Go library, right? This Go library implement that language.language interface. And then Gazelle binary would consume this language as an extension, right? So you have a my extension here, then you put your my extension here. Then this Gazelle binary is consumed by the Gazelle general rules so that you can run Bazel run Gazelle, and then it would just work. Well, in this case, Bazel run my Gazelle, right? But yeah, so let's take a look at an example, right? I think that sounded hard, but I don't think it's supposed to be. So here I'm using one of the most basic example there is.
Let me quickly jump in now. Can you zoom in or make the font a bit bigger?
This one?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so I have two examples, right? And I will line them up. Both of them are supposed to be very easy, right? And it's how I would imagine you would get started on this. So the first one is the extension called test file group. This extension is part of Gazelle itself, right? So you can find this extension inside internal language test file group. And the purpose of this is to generate a tree of file group that dependent on each other that represent your entire Git project. And Gazelle and RulesGo are using this to generate integration test dependency, right? So very quickly, all these functions that you are seeing right here, this new language, all these name right here, they are implementation of the language.language interface. This language.language interface has several functions that you need to implement from the config.configure and resolve.resolver interface as well as all these here. But most of them are not used, right? When you first start out, you don't need to implement all of them. So you do want to name your language, right? So right now the name is test file group, right? And then, yeah, you want to have a new function as well. So your object can be init. So new language is the name of the initialization. You cannot change this name, by the way. So this function name need to stay the same. And yeah, most of these are just so the name function return the name, right? So that's very simple. All of these blanket implementation, so there's nothing hard about them. Their purposes are explained in the language interface. So you should be able to read the documentation in there to figure out what is the purpose of that. I will not go into that right now. Yeah, resolve, embed, all of that is very basic implementation. Return nil, return nothing. Kinds is the first thing that we are returning, and that is returning from the kind implementation. So it's just so what does kind do? Kind tell Gazelle about your rules, right? So the rules that we are generating here using this extension is file group, right? File group is a native rules inside Bazel, and this is actually telling Gazelle that which of the so non-empty attribute is a set of attribute that if present disqualify the rules from being deleted after merge, right? So Gazelle is very intelligent in terms of like it can clean up your build file for redundancy. So if your build file, if you, for example, if you delete all the source code inside that directory, then Gazelle would be able to intelligently look at it and say, hey, this target is completely empty. Let me get rid of it, right? So these attributes are how you let Gazelle know which one to delete and which one not to delete, right? Mergeable attribute is the same thing. So if inside your rules, instead of creating a new inside your build file, instead of creating a new target, right, Gazelle would be able to intelligently merging all the new source file into the old target instead. So here is merging using source. And finally, there's the entire implementation of this extension, right? Generate rules. How does it do it? It would, so first of all, you start with the input, right? Generate args. There are several there are several information that you are given when you want to generate the build file, right? So for example, what directory are you on? What is the related path, right? What is the name of the build file and all the attribute of the build file that you're currently working on? If there's no build file, by the way, this one will be nil. But don't take my word for it, right? Read the documentation. These are very well documented. Kudos to the author of Rules Go and Gazelle. Very well documented, and yeah, feel free to go through them. But yeah, so this args right here is very simple. Here are how we are using it, right? First of all, we declare new rules that we want to generate. That rules is the type file group, right? And the name of it, the name of the rules is all files. We are building the source attribute for this rule, right? And the source attribute will be all the file inside the current directory that will be added into it. And for all the subdirectory inside, we will append all the packages, right? So all the subdirectory are assumed to be sub-packages under that parent packages, and we would also assume that that subdirectory will have a target called all file. So we're just gonna append all these into the source attribute of the rule, right? And then we set the attribute test only of file group to be true, and then we set the visibility attribute to be public if the current build file doesn't have a default visibility reset. And then that's it, right? We return the rules back to Gazelle and tell Gazelle to print it out into the build file. How does it work? What is the result of this running this. So I have a project here. It's just like a habit project of mine, and it would work. It would look something like this, right? If you were to run it, so it would look. You would be able to create a file group target on your root directory, right? With all the file on your root directory inside, and the target of all their subdirectory being included. So here I have two subdirectory. One is internal, and the second one is language, right? So inside language, I would also have another file group, right? It include all the file in there, and here inside BZL under language, I would also have a file group. All of these are being generated by that Gazelle extension, right? Now, obviously, this one I did modify it a bit, but if you go back into this test file group, so it's also the same. The only difference here is that it's setting test only equal true. In mine, I disabled that feature, but yeah, it's essentially the same. So that's how the extension works. Very easy, very simple. One single Golang file, more than one, but mostly, a few line of code inside the generate function, and you have an extension, right? A Gazelle extension. It should not be hard to start writing one. And that's the first example that I really want to direct people to. Anyone who want to start writing a Gazelle extension, please go here and just copy it to get started. The second extension is a little bit more serious, right? But I would always refer to this one when I try to write my own, right? And this is the starlark Gazelle extension, right? This is to generate the BZL library rules for all the file name with the extension .bzl, right? So this one is a little bit more serious. You actually need to declare a lot more things. For example, what kind of file type are you using for your parser, right? And which suffixes to ignore, right? But most of the concept are essentially the same. You would also still have a language. You have a struct that implement the language interface, right? And then you have a new language function that would return an instant of that struct, right? As a language interface. Return a name, right? We still have obviously like a whole bunch of function not being implemented, right? This kind right here, we declaring the same thing, right? Instead of file group, now we're generating BZL libraries, right? But all these attributes are still the same. We have loads. So load is new, right? Previously, we generate file group, which is a native rules of Bazel. So you don't need to load in anything. But BZL library is a custom rule of this repository called Bazel skylib, right? So you need to load it from somewhere, and the load function tell Gazelle where to load it, so that Gazelle in the early in the early stage of generating the build file would include a load statement on top of the file for you. So you don't have to write the load manually, right? There's nothing being implemented by fix, right? It's completely optional. Imports is quite interesting. Return a list of import specs. So here it's just, I think you would need to like read more of this. I would not spend too much time on reading this, but most of these are just, how to say this? Most of these are just telling Gazelle more information about the file and how the build file should be generated.
You thinking like metadata type stuff?
Oh, the data, yeah, the data type stuff are somewhere below here. So it is resolved, I think, and that's where you need your parser, right? And you need to write a parser to read up the source file and read up all of the load statement in the source file to know what altered external dependency that this file is depending on is dependent upon. And yeah, these are like the ones that yeah. It has been a long time since I take a look at this, so I might be confusing with. Oh yeah, so yeah, it's parsing here. Yeah, that's. And then finally, you have generate rules, right? Very same concept. You have the rules objects, right? You can generate multiple target. It doesn't need to be one, right? Previously, we only generate one target file group target named all file, but here you can actually generate several with different names. And here we are using the name of the file instead of instead of all the file being grouped into one rules. So you have a lot of flexibility around here, right? And yeah, that's about it. All of these below are essentially the logic of the parser, right? So here what we are doing is that we are extracting information out of the starlark file by calling into the build library of Bazel build tools, right? And Bazel build tool is dependent on Go starlark implementation, which is, that's where the starlark parser is. So we would be able to understand the load statement inside Gazelle. This is actually quite easy to customize. And what I did in my own project is that I customize it instead of using the Go native starlark parser. Here I'm using tree-seeder Python, the dialect of, an extension of tree-seeder that used to parse Python file. And because starlark and Python are very close, I just load all of the, I would just parse all of the load statement using this tree-seeder query language. You do have to learn tree-seeder for this, but the nice thing about tree-seeder is that it's universal. So once you learn it, you can parse various different language that tree-seeder support. And tree-seeder support a lot of things nowadays. So yeah. Anyhow, that's it, I think. Yeah, that's the second example that I wanted to show, the starlark extension of Gazelle. Both example I show, by the way, are single-fided Golang that can be implemented fairly quickly within a day, right? So it's actually not that hard. For more elaborate example, please check out Rules Go. Please check out Rules Python and the Java extension as well that was recently released. And yeah, that's the end. I think.
Awesome.
Time for questions.
So I actually have one I'll get to in a second. But can you send me those links you were just mentioning? I'm sure everybody can find them, but I'll send a follow-up email afterward with the slides and anything else you want to point people to. And so my question, and apologies if you covered this, I struggle so much to pay attention to this as I'm juggling 3 monitors worth of AV type junk. What is the current state of Gazelle? Is there like a GA release? Is it just taken from effectively head? Is there kind of a roadmap for it? Like, tell me a little bit more about the project itself.
Yeah, Gazelle was originated from Rules Go, and they are very tightly coupled together because, Gazelle used Rules Go to build itself, and Rules Go used Gazelle to generate all the build file inside it. So those two things are quite coupled. So most of the contributor to Rules Go today are contributor to Gazelle as well. We don't really have a roadmap because the previous maintainer went he left Google. So after that, the project was left in a pretty bad stage. But today we were still, doing regular release when the community asked for it, and there are some substantial feature that was implemented, right? Most of the hard work are currently being contributed by the folks at Uber. So the folks at Uber, before they merge a feature into master, they would try to test it internally in their monorepo themselves, right? And regularly when we start like reaching I think 1 month period, we would try to like make a release, or if there's any substantial bug fixes or feature, then we would do a release. So their release, right? As in whether it's still beta is a little bit hard to say. Everything is still in beta, and with the spirit of monorepo, all of the good feature are leaving ahead, right? So yeah, it's
I mean, let's be fair. I work for Google, so the concept of still in beta is kind of common around here.
But yeah,
so that's totally fair.
I would be able to say Gazelle has been very stable for the last few years. All the major adopters of Bazel are using Gazelle as their day-to-day build file management system, right? So I think it's fairly good for people to rely upon, and the interface doesn't change that much. There has been not that much of a major change recently. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. So no questions. We do have a very nice appreciation comment that I dropped on there for you. And time for my own appreciation. Thank you for doing this. Like I said at the start, I like the idea of the community getting on these two and talking about the things that we don't have the resources to focus a ton on. This kind of came up because of a discussion I had with the team about where this fits in and build file generation and things like that. And you saw me asking questions in the Slack a little bit more about Gazelle. And I love the approach you're taking of catering a little more toward these kind of first build type of users. It's something that I've mentioned in the past we're looking to work on as well. So having other people contributing to that is fantastic. Another awesome comment for you. A lot of resources on here. I shared out in chat his slides, so you can get to those. I'm assuming those will stay alive well after this presentation is done.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I have shared out publicly. I think I did, but yeah, they should be public and stay live. I just want to give a quick shout out to PCJ. So PCJ is the person who, out of all these extra resources, he created like I think most of them. So he's the author of like the BazelCon 2021 BOF talk, automating protobuf rules with Gazelle. Definitely go check that out, right? He did substantial work for the Gazelle community. So yeah, go through all these links and you would be able to figure that nice things, build up nice things. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I posted in the chat the traditional survey we have at the end. Very quick, just trying to get some more feedback. It was, have you used Gazelle before? Things you want to see in the future. As always, you can reach me on Slack or just shoot me an email if you have any topics or things you want to see covered. For Son, I've got his Twitter on there. Give him a follow. Keep abreast of all of the, like I said, not just Gazelle stuff. A lot of work toward these new Bazel users and this kind of friendlier kind of introduction to it, which I'm really excited to see and excited to work with him in the future. So with that, we're going to actually end this. For Son, thank you very much. I totally appreciate this.
Jason, I before we end this, I would just ask you, because you came from Red Hat, right? Have you ever built an RPM?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever have written and managed a spec file for an RPM?
I have, but I'm mildly concerned with where this conversation is going.
You know that you can write a Gazelle extension for a spec file to build up an RPM using Bazel.
That's actually really cool. Okay, I thought you were signing me up for work or something.
No,
like that.
No, that's the entire point, right? Is that people keep thinking of Gazelle when they think of a programming language. They don't really realize that anything that you are using build file to build, right? You can write a Gazelle extension for it, namely Kubernetes, Docker, right? Helm chart or RPM, Debian packages, right? You can write Gazelle extension on top of those existing rules to generate and make Bazel work for you, right? Not and you don't have to bend over backward to make these work. And yeah,
That's really cool. I feel like you kind of alluded to that too. That was where you said the word language in the interface is almost slightly misleading because it's not necessarily just that. I'm glad you kind of
yeah.
pointed that out explicitly.
Yeah, I definitely have heard like organization who have very rigid structure to their monorepo was able to write Gazelle extension according to that structure, right? And have a very easy time with Bazel compared to like, more chaotic structure over the place. And
Nice way of putting it.
yeah, I have met both. So yeah, definitely like Gazelle is the key to make a big migration over to Bazel a lot easier. Yeah.
That's cool. I agree with this comment that just came in chat too about Docker being awesome. I spent 6 years doing Kubernetes and container-based stuff, and as soon as you started talking about all that, I'm picturing the various deployment files and all of the YAML that it generates, and having a tool that ties into that and the actual code build process is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. And I'm glad I didn't get signed up to write an RPM for you guys. So that's a double win. Because I work with a lot with students in college, and I tell them that so many times over my career, you end up becoming a specialist because no one was doing something and you're just like, sure, I'll take a look at it. And suddenly that's it. At Red Hat, it was SE Linux or RPM building. And that's exactly how I ended up building my first RPM. I'm like, I don't know, it sounds kind of cool. And I was tagged as you are the RPM maintainer for life now. So I've been doing this enough where you start asking that. I'm like, no, what am I signing up for?
Last job I was maintaining RPM for Git, and yeah, that was not nice. But anyhow,
yeah, I could nerd out for a while talking about this kind of stuff. We are butting up against the time, but looking forward to hopefully seeing you at BazelCon in New York, and we get to nerd out in person over things.
Oh man, hopefully, yep.
Hopefully, that'd be really cool. All right, everyone, thank you for coming as usual. Feel free to reach out to me however you need to, and otherwise, I will see everyone next month. Thanks.
Take care.